Once again, we're going to talk about the reverse green weenie, and the recipe is Gama B10S. In this example, I am going to use a size 2 just because you can see it well, and it will show everything we need to do. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is you got to put the eyes on. This is a 240 denier thread. It's actually rod wrapping thread, not fly tying thread. So anyway, put the thread on, and I put a base all the way to the back. Don't have to. The really important part that you really need a good base of thread is at the point, play on words here, at the exact point of the hook, go straight up, imaginary line, go from there to the halfway point of what you've got left there. It seems to balance better at that point for some reason, and I put about 6 or 7 layers of thread right at that point. What I'm doing that for is to be able to get the eye and the thread and the glue all a place to bind. On this size 2 hook, I'm using a 1/30th ounce lead eye. 6 times. Torque it really good 6 times. Alright, so now I'm going to look at it and make sure it's straight. Looks pretty straight to me. Now that it's straight, I'm going to put a couple of wraps underneath. And I'm not going to cut it yet, but I am going to get the thread based out of the way a little bit. So this is nothing more than black fingernail polish. It used to only be available around Halloween, but the current fashion standards allow it to be in stock pretty much all year now. What I'm doing is I'm putting a good layer all across the facing of the eyes and some in the back, but where I'm going to put a little glob is literally right here. What am I doing that for? Well, I'm actually using it as a glue, not just for eyes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give it another couple of wraps, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and underneath. And then of course I'm going to use my fancy dancy whip finisher because I can. 4 or 5 turns on whip finisher, and you should have it right at the eye where you just put your glue, and done. Alright, so that takes care of the eye. The hard part for me is waiting for it to dry. So I did some prep work earlier. I've got one that's already dry. A little bit of tightening there. Alright. This one's hook, in my opinion, is a little too far back, but not really a big deal. And I need to find the other no good scissors. Those will work just fine. I'm going, what am I doing that for? Well, I don't want to use my good scissors for what I'm going to do here in just a few seconds. So, wire. This is some wire I think I picked up at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or one of those. It's just a little artistic wire. It's copper. It's colored black. And I'm going to take not my good scissors, and I'm going to cut off a strip, I don't know, about 5 or 6 inches long, just enough. It's cheap, so you can waste as much as you want it. It's not a big deal. I'm going to kind of lay it over the front here. So, thread back on the hook, in front of the eye, underneath the eye, to the rear. And I'm going to lay that. You see about the length of the hook? Why am I doing that? Well, because I'm going to bend it back. What that's going to do is lock it, where if you have to, it will not pull out. And it shouldn't anyway. It's just an extra precaution I take, not using my good scissors again, and locking it down. Alright, so now I've got the wire tied in, about 5 or 6 inches. Not a big deal, no hurry, no worry. And that's just going to stay back there out of the way. This is the fun one. This is saddle hackle. It's called a booger pack. I get this one from Whiting. Let me see if I can get that in the frame. You can use any of the barred colors you want. I like the olive grizzly. Really nice feathers. Now, what size am I going to pick for this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the fibers, and I want 1.5 times on the longest fiber, 1.5 times the gap of the hook. And you know, it's not an exact science, so I'm just going to kind of wing it. That means up toward the front of the fibers, it's about 1 gap, which is what I want. Again, I'm going to tie it in. Now, I like to pull the fibers back out of the way while I'm tying them down. And I'll do the same thing. And I won't take it forward, but I do like to lock it down. All right. We got both of those out of the way for now. Now I'm going to take and use my little handy dandy material holder spring back here to get them locked out of the way. Here is where I made a huge change in how I make these flies. You can use dubbing. It's going to take a while, a bit of it. Or you can do like I do, and I use, this is Mohair yarn. I buy a whole skein of it and I roll it back up into a ball, and I use it forever. For this, I'm just going to kind of throw it in my lap until I get everything locked down. I'll have 10, 12 inches here just hanging out the front end for a minute. And then lock it down, bring the thread all the way to the eye of the hook, give it a couple of half hitches to get it to lock in place to keep you from losing it. Bobbin hanger. I find this absolutely amazing how easy it makes this fly. Alright, so I've got these materials locked in place. I've got the thread pulled out of the way. I've got a double chunk of my mohair here. So what I'm going to wind up doing is honestly just using the rotary feature of the vise, and I'm going to build up the back a little bit, because I've got that double yarn in my hand. I'm going to go to the front and build that up a little bit. And I'm just making a base layer with a double yarn. You can go with a single if you want. It just takes a little bit more time. It's not a big deal. What I'm trying to do is build up the body to match the eyes. So it's going to be nice and thin in the back, really thick at the eyeballs, and it just takes a few minutes to get it wound up. And you can, like I said, you can use dubbing, but dubbing for me takes longer, and honestly I don't like to take a lot of time tying my flies. You see I'm still doing the winding business, and I'll occasionally go back and forth in front. Now I'm concentrating near the eyes. I'm trying to keep it even. It doesn't really matter if you do keep it even, because once you bury it under the hackle, you ain't going to see it anyway. So you can see how nice and thick it's getting. Here we go. We're almost there. Alright, so now that we've got the body all built, I can go ahead and tie it off and give it a trim. One more little half inch. There we go. Notice I've left this little no-tie point. I'm going to use my scissors to point it. The no-tie point, I call it no-tie point. People crowd the eye really badly with these flies. This isn't the only one, but this is one of the worst. Right here, I've got a bare shank for about an eye, hook eye back. And I'm going to give this 2 or 3 just to bind her down. Give it a trim. I usually keep my scissors in my hand. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Anytime I go between materials, I like to put a little half hitch. And again, you can see I've got some room here. Now, the next thing I'm going to tie in place is going to be my hackle. Now, my hackle, I can do the same thing. I can use the rotary function, but I'm pretty comfortable doing it this way. So about 4 or 5 wraps up. 4 or 5 wraps, and you want to make sure that you get the hackles not buried in themselves. So what I've done, I've got 4 behind. I'm going to take a wrap over, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to take a wrap. So I made an X over the eyes. I don't know if you could see that or not, but I made an X over the eyes. And there I'm right there at the no-tie point. So I'm going to try to move the hackle back just a little bit to keep my no-tie point clear. Trim. Get all these little fuzzy fibers out of the way. Give me some lockdown wraps. And of course a half hitch. Now, Yep, see I buried that one hackle right there. Got it. Okay. Don't know why I worried about that. That's on the bottom. This wire, I don't know how well you can see it, so let me see if I can get my little background here. This wire I have found has saved me some time on the water. It costs a few extra seconds when you tie. You remember we did the hackle as you're looking at the fly eye from the front. We're doing it clockwise. The wire, counterclockwise. You're going to do about 4 or 5 reps. You notice I'm wiggling the mess out of it. What I'm trying to do is get the wire between the fibers while I don't bind the fibers down. And sometimes I'll just take and use my scissors to move things around. And I'm only trying to make 3 or 4 wraps. I'm not trying to take and make as many wraps as I did with the hackle. Again, I'm just getting these things. What this does is when the fish bites, or you hit it on an oyster, or you nick it with your hook of the hook point of your buddy's fly, because you're going to be in the boat with somebody, right? Or fishing next to somebody. Don't go to the saltwater by yourself. Well, I try not to, but I do it anyway. So here's what we got going on. Got the wire in place. I've locked it down. Now, schools of thought on this. A lot of folks will just take and do the haywire twist, but this is copper. Pretty soft, so it doesn't really break as easily with a haywire twist method as steel would. Take that little piece of copper that you just had, kind of bend it backwards, and lock it down. And you can use your whip finish tool again. And I sometimes do, and sometimes I use half hitch, but yep, that's why. All right. Now we got a good knot there. Good knot, trim, and of course the same glue that I used earlier I'm going to use again. Except this time not quite as much, and I'm really just going to put a dab to kind of hold it in place. Check to make sure your eye is clear. I'm tightening my glue back down. So what I'm doing right now before I get crazy, there we go. All right. The last step for this particular fly, this is going to be the bottom of the fly. The hook's going to point up. I'm going to trim straight across. What that will allow is the fly to sit on the bottom with the fibers pointing up without tilting. That's my theory anyway. You put it out there and see what you think. But this is a size 2 reverse green weenie, ready to fish. Rides hook point up, and it sits fairly flat. I've got it tilted towards the camera so you can see what's going on. But very effective fly for sheephead. I've used it pretty much all times of the year, but my favorite is still February. Tie it, try it, have fun.